Ready to roll?
Action.
All right, well, hi everyone. So if I haven't met you already online, I'm Mike Ingstedt, and I'm the professor sort of representing the social sciences side of this class. And we're actually here, Beck Barnes is here as well. And the point of today's brief video is to introduce you all to Alan Peak. We can pan over here. But Alan is a board member with our local Pikes Peak chapter of Trout Unlimited, and he's really generously agreed to sit down with us and talk to us about sort of his path to involvement with this issue that we're looking at, as well as his vision for how we could effectively sort of reshape our relationship and engagement with urban streams in Colorado Springs. Okay, so with that, we'll pan over to Alan. He has generously agreed to be our first guinea pig for this film. So thanks for joining, Alan. And if you'd be willing, maybe you could just introduce us, tell us who you are, and how you've come to be such an advocate for urban streams in Colorado Springs.
My name is Alan Peak. I'm, again, board member for the local Pikes Peak chapter of Trout Unlimited. I joined about 8 months ago as a member of Trout Unlimited, and then immediately became a board member for Trout Unlimited the same day, I believe. So my path is, as briefly as I can make it, I was in the Army for 5.5 years in the infantry. Came home, started fishing a lot, and realized that maybe I could make a career out of it or a job. So I did, and I, in my transition out of the Army, started fly fishing and became a guide with Rocky Mountain Fly Fishing Guides. The second year, I had worked so hard for them. So the second transition, the third year, I was the head guide for them, which really fueled my passion and made it a very serious thing, because I was thinking, I could make this a full-time, thing. And I did that for a few years, and then I did leave the industry for a couple seasons, and I built a tiny house. I was trying to make myself better, fix myself a little bit after a couple rough deployments. So me and my father built the tiny house together as a way to get back on my feet. I was having terrible sleeping problems. I was getting off some pretty serious medication. So every day I woke up, worked really hard, my mom fed me, and then I went to sleep tired. And it really restarted my life. And then when I was done, I had a totally different life set so that I could do more of what I wanted and have control of my time. Originally, it was kind of planned that I was going to be a guide out of my tiny house, because guide's a seasonal opportunity mostly. But then I, as I got better and decided, well, I have this GI Bill, so I better make use of it. So now I'm a history major at UCCS. So I'm going to be a senior next semester. So I'm excited about that. Not sure exactly where it'll lead. I might, I've got extra GI Bill, so I'm going to be maybe pursuing something else, maybe a master's in geography. I'm not sure. But for now, I'm kind of stepped away from guiding. Still have a little bit of my foot in the door there. I do a couple trips during the week in the summertime. And then what it has transitioned into is really being an advocate for the waterways in my extra time. And that's where I sit today. I started fishing Fountain Creek kind of in because our other waterways have become so busy. I started fishing a lot of the urban waters that are blue on a map and need to be looked at. And you find some really amazing things around Colorado Springs that no one knows about if you're just willing to look. There's master angler size largemouth bass here in Colorado Springs on public property. You just gotta know where to look. So that's what kind of drove me down here to Fountain Creek. And one day they had closed one of the public places that I fish, actually Red Rocks. It actually wasn't closed. It was always closed apparently, but someone had took the signs down and they had just replaced the signs. So I had been fishing there for a few months, and the volunteers told me to leave, and I said, well, there's no signs, sorry. So they just replaced the signs. And so I was like, okay, well, now what? So I went down below Gold Hill Mesa and I started fishing. And that's when I started catching these really beautiful brown trout and then kind of looking around and saying, well, what could this be? And just seeing. I think when I started catching brown trout down there, it seemed to me, and maybe it was just because I started going down there more, but it really seemed since then the height of the trash and some of the problems that the creek has faced. And I kind of saw it, as an opportunity. So that's where I'm here.
That's
in the
great.
Fishing sense.
So I have kind of two things that I think would be interesting to just hear your perspective a little more on. One is what your experience to date has been like when you're fishing these urban creeks.
Mhm.
What it's like and how it might differ from sort of this like idyllic notion of fishing.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then the second question is sort of how do we get from where we are now, or what you've experienced so far, to what you think it could be or should be.
Exactly.
So why don't we start and just sort of describe to us what it's like to be one of the few people that's really fishing this urban space.
Absolutely. There is some stark contrasts between where I take my clients and Fountain Creek.
Mm-hmm.
On the South Platte, you have a riffle, a run, and a pool, and you kind of navigate those areas to see where the fish are feeding, and they, change their patterns throughout the day. On Fountain Creek, however, you don't really see that as much. You see lots of, beach-like structures with erosion. And then you see a lot of man-made structures, concrete and boulders, and the fish really tend to stick to those, in my opinion. But then below that, there's really nothing else that looks like a river. It's majorly big parts of it is just concrete and engineered structures, or maybe an electrical, what do you call that? Those electrical pole transmission lines. Maybe one of the pylons comes into the river, and that creates fish habitat. And that's the case at Dorchester Park. So that's a big difference. Is up in the hills, in the mountains, you have natural riffle run pool structure, and down here you have very man-made structures, bridges and stuff.
What about the experience when you're there? Like, is it this like pleasant fishing experience that people might envision, or like what is it actually like when you're on the water?
So there's a couple different experiences for me. I don't live in Colorado Springs because my tiny house is technically illegal. I'm kind of pushed to the outside boundaries of society. So I live about 45 minutes from Colorado College and about an hour from UCCS, right? And so I travel a lot and I commute. And when you commute long distances, you often have extra time on your hands. So in between classes, I can fish. In between going to class to family dinner, I can fish. Mm-hmm. So a lot of times it's just a couple hours experience. It's killing time. Yeah. Lunch break or half day of work kind of experience. Mm-hmm. And it's then broken down into two more experiences. It's I'm alone. Maybe I always put my headphones on. I know that's kind of against the fly fishing drain, but I put my headphones on and I kind of escape all the city noise, and I just kind of enjoy it to myself. And then I take the headphones off, excuse me, and I fish it with my friends, and that's really become something different. I don't generally fish when I fish with my friends. I let them fish, and it's more of a friendship experience and hanging out with people. So
that's very cool. All right. Well, so then I think I think the students would be really interested to hear as well, is what you're trying to do to make this amenity.
Absolutely.
The amenity that you think it could be, and how you're going about trying to do that.
Absolutely. Well. Well, I'm breaking a few rules for sure. Once I started realizing what it was and what it could be, I started posting it on social media. So in the fly fishing world, it's generally thought, especially if you're on a professional level or you're a really good fisherman, that you don't take a picture of a fish and show it to the world, especially in the social media world, and then hotspot it. So what I'm doing is called hotspotting. And that's the action of telling people directly where these fish are. And in this day and age, if you even hotspot Deckers, which is one of the most well-known places to go fly fish, it's still kind of a faux pas, But here what I'm doing is breaking that. And I've been putting it on Instagram and Facebook and loudly too, because I've been catching some very nice fish. So that's one aspect of it. I did join Trout Unlimited as a board member. And before I joined, I kind of asked them what's being done here. 10 years ago, Jack Hunter was the president, and he was really down for the cause of Fountain Creek, and he was an active voice. Well, my answer back was, well, what can be done? So that's what really pushed me to join, and as they described to me, is they really haven't had a champion for it. And what they need is someone to be a champion. So that was kind of their reasoning for not having any foot in Fountain Creek, so to speak. So I joined as a board member at large, and with my special kind of subject matter being Fountain Creek, and I've kind of brought it into Pikes Peak as well, because I've fished every public creek on Pikes Peak. So that was what I did last summer.
Nice. And so, through your involvement with Trout Unlimited, or through your advocacy, what do you hope will change? Is it perception? Is it actual things on the ground that need to change? What needs to be different?
First off was perception. That was number one, because I've heard jokes amongst in the industry, fishermen, and the local community about Fountain Creek, and the joke was always, you're just going to catch a brown trout or a turd, a poop, and I didn't like that, and so I wanted to change that. That it was something that fishermen should take credit for, take it as ours, what it should be, not just a sewer. What I hope to happen, I spoke to the member meeting as the speaker last month, and at the end of the meeting, at the end of my hour-and-a-half speech, I had 5 questions, and the first one is, as a membership, should we adopt Fountain Creek down to Nevada Avenue? And overwhelmingly, I'd say that everyone voted yes.
Wow.
So the membership is thinking that, we want to take part of this. Up until now, as a board member, I was speaking alone at the board meetings, and I didn't really speak too much at the members meeting. Last month, me being the keynote speaker allowed me to have the stage. So, and asking the question kind of proved to me that yes, it is wanted and warranted within our membership. So now, going forward, unfortunately we have this coronavirus, so a couple things have happened. Last week was supposed to be our board member retreat, and that was supposed to be the policy kind of, looking forward at what our policy is going to be in the future.
Yeah.
So that was also canceled. And then our membership meeting this month is canceled. So this month membership meeting is kind of important because we're electing our board. I don't know where that's going to go. I've suggested I'd like to be VP because no one else has taken that spot for 4.5 years and would further help, make TU a stronger organization, help the president. The president right now wants out, and he doesn't have a replacement. However, I'm so new to the organization, I can't just say, I'll be president. So I've suggested that I'd like to become VP for maybe in the future, I could take on that president position. I don't know what's going to happen. I really don't know what TU is going to, how the cards will fall with TU. I think the next year will tell really what will happen. And I've given myself a year within the TU organization. It's important to note, and this is within the board members, they know this as well, and this has been spoke of, but there's a group of people outside of TU that do not respect TU. And I'm talking about professional fishermen, recreational fishermen throughout, and this is something that we really need to engage and fix. And we also need to fix the age gap, because right now TU has bigger problems, and that's who's attending and who's speaking out for the creeks. And right now it's looking a little bit more like a fishing club for gentlemen who like to float rivers and have money to float instead of maybe go walk 6 miles. And the younger crowd really isn't represented. So I think that's going to be an issue forward. But over the next year, what I think in the next few months, I would like to propose to the board that we adopt Fountain Creek down to Nevada Avenue, specifically so that when projects come up, like infrastructure projects, specifically like the No Man's Land project up between Manitou and Old Colorado City. When projects like that happen, I think we need to absolutely have our best people within Trout Unlimited be there to help with, in-stream structure, and really helping those fish. What happened in the last project? Have you guys seen that yet?
It's horrible.
They really did a terrible job. I mean, it got me to the point where I'd show up on that construction site every other week just to take photographs.
Wow.
And they started noticing.
Mm-hmm.
Manitou Springs started noticing that I was showing up taking photographs. And it caused a lot of emails because what they did there was wrong. And going forward, if we adopt Fountain Creek down to Nevada Avenue, every time they knock down a bridge and rebuild it, I hope that our voice is there. That we can do better for the creek than worse.
And just really briefly for the students that are watching, could you just give like 30 seconds of context about that project? And what you think
So
is wrong?
in between Manitou Springs and Old Colorado City, there was a project where they took down a bridge and then they actually straightened the creek. So the creek is now straight. There's no features in it. There's some regulatory problems that are happening on the edge of the creek. I've been told, I don't know, I'm not an expert on that, but it seems to be that Wildcat Construction didn't do the very good job.
Okay.
And going forward, again, I'm kind of the new champion to this at Trout Unlimited. But going forward, I'd like that those infrastructure projects be a little bit really closely more monitored, and then we have our input as to what their ideas are.
Yeah.
So if you do go into that project, I don't know what street it's on exactly.
I do.
What is it?
It's like it's the Colorado Avenue Bridge.
Colorado, yeah.
Yeah,
Avenue
so
Bridge.
it's like the dividing line between Manitou and Colorado Springs.
And then throughout that project, there were huge releases of mud. So our River Watch people were down there taking samples, and it was definitely affecting the creek. So I hope we talk about that in the future.
Yeah. Well, so I feel like this was such a good capsule summary of like the challenges of having like a fishable stream, in an urban setting. Like there's all these different interests. I don't know if there's anything left that.
No, I'll just go real quick.
Yeah.
This is the last part. I hope that they do stock it. I don't see why not. I have caught a rainbow trout that was about 18 inches at the confluence of Bear Creek, and I brought that up to the federal Fish and Wildlife guy for the western region, and I brought it up to Parks and Wildlife. No one seemed to care because they have fish blocks. So, okay. So if you don't have any problems with that, and that's one of the biological concerns, but another one's the creek chub. CPW blames, creek chub for not stocking. I'm not suggesting we stock Monument Creek, and I'm not suggesting that we stock below Nevada. So I think that what we're saying is let's bring the cold water fishery distinction down to Nevada Avenue and stock it up, and then put some fish habitat in so we can have a viable fishery, not just kind of plucking on brown trouts that have been falling off the mountain, because that's what they're coming from. I think this is off the mountain. So I think that we stock thousands of fish and quail, Monument, Prospect, all these lakes that are public lakes, and they're stocked for put and take. So they're stocked to die and go home and be eaten. Why can't we stock, a couple hundred fish in Fountain Creek as an experiment? I mean, let's call it what it is, an experiment. Let's see what happens when we put 300 fish in Fountain Creek. Let's see if they survive. Let's see if they grow bigger. I think they will. I have caught huge fish on Fountain Creek, bigger than the ones in your presentation. So I ask, why not?
Can I'll come into the video to ask a question. So I think you brought up a lot of these really sort of tricky problems that balance different interests. And what you just said would intrigued me in the idea of the chicken and egg problem with potentially getting the older members of TU on board with the idea that this can be a fishable system. So I guess I was just wondering if you could speak a little bit to the maybe culture clash within TU. if that's appropriate,
Absolutely.
and or like how do you think organizations that frame themselves in this sort of conservation light can serve a role in thinking about the goals that we've just been talking about?
Absolutely. I think, let's go with the last question, right? How can we can use our voice. TU has a voice, right? Like my voice was only good to a certain point, and then my voice needed to get bigger. So the only way I could do that was to join Trout Unlimited to add to their voice. You know, I could I personally could have joined, you know, the Sierra Club and the Fountain Creek Water Sentinels. I could have joined a myriad of different organizations for Fountain Creek. And that's kind of how I see Trout Unlimited, to really specifically answer your question, is there are so many nonprofits now, you know, popping up, and different voices and organizations to speak to Fountain Creek and what we want to do, different recreations, you know, different entities.
Mm-hmm.
Well, TU represents about this much, but our voice is thrown onto that pile of voices. And that's what's really important. It's shifting the needle in a different direction. So I think that's important. And to get to our membership specifically, and it's not just our nonprofit, it's all nonprofits, is there's a problem with younger crowds. The younger generations that might be really interested in these urban fisheries aren't as represented as like the generations that are now. So, you know, like again, I say that Trout Unlimited has a lot of older generations. They have lots of money and wealth. They're your stereotypical fly fishermen. So when before the meeting starts, they talk about their float trips. And those are very expensive trips. You know, these are $500 plus trips. That's not who I'm looking for at all. I want the younger generations. I want, you know, and TU as an organization wants more diversity. So I think bringing a more diverse crowd, and these are the people that I fish with, to these TU meetings and having their friends come and leveraging social media to our new populations of people that want to know how to fly fish really will bring people in that care about this creek. So I think that that's how it's going to have to happen, is there's going to be, you know, have to be new crowds of people to speak for it.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.